Felipe, what is the level of, I guess, relief, but also joy from the Mexican point of view that they've now won 3 consecutive CONCACAF tournaments going into a home World Cup?
Yeah, relief is a good way to put it because I think anytime they meet the United States in a final, there's always that deep fear, right? Like we cannot lose to the Americans, and I think that's always the pressure that a Mexican national team has to experience before they play the U.S. There's always that notion that Mexico has to put their stamp down and their authority in CONCACAF anytime they reach a final, especially against a rival. And I think they've done that. We not an unexpected result. This is a very strong Mexico team. This is the second consecutive Gold Cup now where they, even with a different coach, they really try to take the strongest team possible. Same with Nations League. And we talked about it in the preview. The one thing that they look one of the ways they look better under Javier Aguirre is just the way they really do push the ball progressively throughout the match. And you could see the quick play, the high press. They are much more aggressive, I think, off the ball as well. And then Raúl Jiménez, we really talked about that, him being the star and really key for Mexico, not just now, but heading into the World Cup. And I think what he gives you, other than the goal that he scored, is a lot of play from that center forward position, a lot of combination play. They looked really creative around the box. And you're right, momentum so important for a host nation. And who would have thought 3 years ago, after crashing out in the group stage in Qatar, that they would look like, of the 3 host nations, the strongest heading into 2026?
Felipe, Mexico were good. They created a ton of chances. Obviously, it was a controversial game. There were controversial decisions within this game. However, I would still say that Mexico have room for improvement. It was a good performance. It was enough to get over the finish line. You can see that passion, that pride that Aguirre has brought to that fabulous jersey. But what do you think that really can be improved within this group? Even though they're celebrating right now, they've got their hands on trophy, but I still think there's room for improvement. So what can they do to improve and get better before that World Cup?
Yeah, I think when you look at this team, especially tonight and through the Gold Cup, a few spots on the field that I think are still up for competition. You look at the goalkeeper position, Luis Malagón, I think struggled, throughout the competition, not really strong tonight either. Lucky to get away with, some hesitation coming out on that 50-50 ball early in the second half. That could have been the lead for the U.S. And I think, he's not a big keeper, and so he's very athletic, very acrobatic, has to really make himself bigger, and I don't think he did that. So looking to 2026, Memo Ochoa is on the bench. He may go to his 6th World Cup. He wants to do that. Is he still the option, heading into that 2026 World Cup, just so you have experience and a bit more size? So I think goalkeeper really has to improve for Mexico. The right back position as well, Jorge Sanchez, sort of in and out of that starting 11 over the last few years. But other than that, I think really a strong core in midfield. I mentioned it in the preview again, Javier Aguirre trying different players. Marcel Ruiz, a great game today. Really different profiles. A big central midfielder, gets the assist, and then the 16-year-old guys. I mean, Gilberto Mora. I was mesmerized by him. I think he's a young version of a Mexican Xavi Hernandez. He can be that good. I think his ceiling is very high. And so around those key spots, backline, midfield, really looking strong. They've got their number 9. I think the goalkeeper position is a question, though.
Let's talk about the manager, Javier Aguirre. We mentioned him a few times. This is his 3rd time managing Mexico. He's led them to 2 previous World Cups. And I think with a lot of turmoil following Tata Martino failing to get Mexico out of the group and Jaime Lozano lasting a very short time in charge of the Mexican national team, they wondered where they were going. And they turned back to an old hand. He's 66 years old, but he's still doing the job for Mexico. What have you made of what he has done to turn around the fortunes of this program and win back-to-back trophies now?
Yeah, he understands. We talk a lot about culture. We've talked a lot about culture with Mauricio Pochettino. Does he understand the culture of the U.S. men's national team? I think that's still a question, still a bit of a debate. There's no question in Mexico, after having a foreign manager in Tata Martino, and that was just really, it got toxic at the end there. Javier Aguirre is a guy that understands the Mexican culture, understands the pressures of the national team, and he just brings, I think, a lot of confidence and calmness to a very frenzied national team, as you guys know. And I think he reminds me a bit of like an older version of Luis Enrique, not in terms of how I think hyper he is, but just the calming presence. He steps in front of a microphone. Everyone understands what he's delivering. He has a great relationship with the Mexican press, which I think helps. But also, I think you can see that he's trying younger players. Just because he's coming in as in his 3rd stint doesn't mean he's out of touch. And I think that's been something that the Mexican press and the fans have really appreciated.
What do you make of the performances in the competition from Raúl, Jiménez and Edson Álvarez? I mean, two outstanding performances once again tonight. Difference makers, clearly. That experience so vital for Mexico going forward.
Yeah, we talked about Edson Álvarez. If he can score goals, that makes it even more dangerous. You saw in the first half, he did start as a center back and then slowly push forward as they gained possession and earned more space, really taking over the territory throughout the pitch. But, I think in what he lacks in terms of like mobility and I think agility, he really makes up for it with intelligence. He's always well positioned. He really fights for 90 minutes, wears that armband proudly, and really is, I think, the heart and soul of this team. Raúl Jiménez, though, just a very, very classy number 9. There's so much to really admire about the way that he plays the game. Always the type of number 9 that managers really like. Tata Martino liked him too because he's not just a scorer. He can come back for the ball. He can post up. He can really combine with the number 10. He's unselfish. But when he wants to finish, he can really deliver the way he did today. And so, this is a Premier League striker. And I think one of the top strikers, if not the best striker, right now in CONCACAF. You mentioned it, Ian. Is he the best player in CONCACAF? I think that's a very interesting debate considering how the Canadian players have looked of late. But this is a guy that really has regained his form and looks really strong right now.
Felipe, overall, when I see success for this Mexican national team, it really all has to come together. And I'm talking about the supporters, the media, the players, the management. They all have to be on the same wavelength. They all have to be in the same sync for it to be successful. Am I right in saying they're getting closer and closer to everyone being on the same page, and Aguirre is probably the reason for that?
I think so. I mean, Aguirre is a big part of it. That's why they hired him to move away from the controversy of, hey, we went for a big name, or perhaps we went for an inexperienced coach that we thought was going to understand the players, which was the case with Jaime Lozano. Javier Aguirre, you know what you're getting out of him, and the experience and just the man management. I think he has that under control as well. But yes, I think centrally that the nucleus of what is the fans and the media in Mexico and the confidence that they may have for their national team has improved a lot. A couple of years ago, there was talk of the fans abandoning this national team. Now, we haven't seen that. I think that's the beauty of the fan base for Mexico. They show up no matter what. But it's really important a year away from a World Cup, because I think the one thing, the edge that host nations receive, when they are at a World Cup, they're not always the best teams at the tournament. But if they can just add a plus to their performances when they have that support with 60, 70,000 people behind them, Mexico can be really a difficult team to break down. I think they're still learning like who they are, with some of the new players. But if they go into this World Cup the way with more wins and more trophies, that says everything about momentum. And I think that's what they value.
You look at the U.S. point of view, I think the fact that we're talking about Mexico as deserved winners, as having outplayed the U.S. in this game, what does that reflect upon the U.S., considering that we were a year away from a home World Cup, and I think we can say they enter it having finished their competitive schedule with almost no momentum. There is no feeling of, the U.S. are going to go on a run at this World Cup. There is that feeling of they didn't perform well in this game. They've had some up and down moments. It could easily have gone out to either Guatemala or Costa Rica in the knockout rounds of this tournament. Is there a real sense now for the U.S. that this is an opportunity wasted, having the World Cup in the United States in a year's time?
I think it was an opportunity wasted as far as you could have had your best team out there. Had all of the players wanted to be competing in this competition, we might have seen a different final. We might have seen a different competition. But I will say this. I think the players who actually took part for the United States in this competition deserve a pat on the back. They absolutely played their hearts out. In this type of a game, they went for it. Unfortunately, when it comes to cup finals, when it comes to big games, you need your top performers to turn up. If you look at the starting 11, who really turned up from this 11 that actually went out there? We didn't see much from Diego Luna, okay? Obviously, the big talking point going into this game, you expect him to maybe be a difference maker, create some chances, maybe even get himself a couple of shots on target. Few and far between did we even see him in possession of the ball. Adjuman had a couple of great chances, one in particular in the second half, swing and a miss on the ball. These big moments, you need players to step up in a national team jersey. That's the difference between winning and losing, going to extra time or not, winning and getting your hands on a trophy or not. Defensively, I thought Chris Richards really stood out today. Excellent performance, obviously, with the goal. It's a brilliant thing. But I thought defensively, his positional play was really, really good. But the United States clearly showed us that they've got ways to go to improve. But I don't want to take anything away from the group. It's a group that was relatively inexperienced. It was a group that has come together and been thrown out there, expected to perform in CONCACAF. And against nations like Mexico are playing their best football of late, it's not easy to do.
And you see here the results in the end for the United States at this Gold Cup. Difficulties in that quarterfinal game, eventually winning on penalties against Costa Rica after getting through the group stage with 9 points from 9. Now, there was a big moment in the actual playing of the game. Still, I believe at 1-1 at the time that the incident occurs, there is a ball that's loose, and the defender falls on the ball with his hand, breaking his fall with his left hand. Then you see Jorge Sanchez, the right back, going to ground, and he breaks his fall with his hand. Now, there was a lot of conversation. Obviously, this still image does not look good. It looks like a handball, but our rules expert, Christina Unkel, joined the watch-along with Call It What You Want and said that she didn't think that it was a penalty.
Yeah, it's not a handling offense. And I know people are gonna be like, well, it touched his hand. Yes, it touched his hand, right? But that doesn't indicate, right? It has to be a deliberate handling. Here, what's going to play against it is he's falling already. He's committed into the tackle. His left arm is already extended. He's bracing for that fall. It just bad luck or timing, or maybe great luck and timing, that the ball ends up like literally directly underneath his hand as he's going in to kind of plant. So because the ball's not there and then he extends his hand, this is one of those that we call non-deliberate handling offense, and therefore it would be called. Referee Mario was right there, spot on, called it big, like no kind of a thing. And it's a very easy call from the referee world to say this isn't a handling offense because it's not a deliberate handling offense because he was already falling and bracing himself.
So by the letter of the law, as Christina says, no penalty. Do you agree with that decision? I think there's been a lot of conversation. A lot of the U.S. fans feel aggrieved about this one.
Yeah, I don't really care what the U.S. soccer fans think about it. I don't care what former U.S. soccer players, including our own Chuck Davies, I hear he was a bit angered about the decision there from Christina Unkel. I don't care. I mean, listen, to me, it's not a penalty kick. Obviously, as a defender, I would say that you have a right to put your hand on the ground. I've never actually seen it fall on top of the ball in the way that it did do. And I think the fact that the hand rolls over the ball, it sort of makes people feel like he's trying to hold the ball, move the ball away for it, therefore it being deliberate. It's not deliberate. And in any ways, to me, it's a hint of desperation if you're looking for a penalty kick like that. And in my personal opinion, I don't want to win competitions with decisions that are controversial like that either. It's not a penalty kick for me. I'm okay with the decision, and we must get over big moments like that. I mean, it's just not. The decision was right from the official on the field, and I think move on was the correct term. So Christina got it spot on here, and I don't like to agree with her because I want the US to get that penalty kick and obviously go on and get something from this game. But it is the right call at the end of the day for me.